Hey everybody, Kasabe here, and I made one of these wish list videos last year, and a good portion of it's probably going to be recycled if you remember watching this one, but we're at that time of year where we're starting to wait for some information to come out regarding MLB 22, so here are the things that I'm hoping for in the new edition of the game. Before I do that though, I want to touch on some of the things that were added this year, and I realize it took a lot of time to do certain things like create a stadium, the transition to next gen, the transition to Xbox. On top of that, you have the parallel system in Diamond Dynasty, you have the mobile app, you have the refined UI that's on the main menu, and of course you have pinpoint pitching. Like, they added a lot this last year, and I won't discount that fact, but when it comes down to it, there's just some things missing in the core gameplay that I hope is addressed. I'll also just briefly mention before I get into the wish list that I'm not a huge Diamond Dynasty player. I'm sure there's a whole lot of content and other tweaks that you guys would want to Diamond Dynasty that I just don't really have much to talk about since I don't play the mode. I will say the one thing that has to change is freezes. That is the main thing with Diamond Dynasty, and part of the reason I'm swayed away from playing Diamond Dynasty games in general. To me, there's nothing more frustrating than playing a game for 45 minutes, especially in a competitive aspect, and it just not counting. You wasted your time. There's a freeze off that ultimately is just who blinks first. You can't play other games in the meantime. That's incredibly frustrating, and especially if MLB The Show is looking to get a little bit more out of like tournaments and championship events and stuff like that. That is something that they absolutely have to take care of. If you guys know me, you know I make logos, I make stadiums, but I'm a huge proponent of franchise. I don't do like rebuilds or anything like that on YouTube, but I play a ton of franchise offline. I like building my own worlds, drafting my own players, things like that. Franchise needs a lot of help. There's a whole movement going around right now called Make MLB The Show 22 Better in terms of franchise mode, and while there's a ton of stuff you could add to franchise mode, there's only so much you can do in any given 1 year, and here are a list of things that I think would make the franchise scope a little bit better. The first main thing that it's on my wish list is trade and player progression changes. There are so many trades that I see on Twitter that are just abhorrently bad, like Juan Soto for 2 slapdick prospects. There's a lot of trades that happen because of players in the final year of their contract, and like I think there's something in the CPU that just like detects that a player is in the final year of their contract and like the team won't get anything by signing them, so they just try and trade away for any value whatsoever, even if it's just like freaking hilarious how bad the trade is. Like the computer just is like, we're gonna do this because we need some value. The game has to realize at a certain point that there are star players or players above a certain overall that are just like untouchable. You want to build a franchise around them, even if you're like rebuilding the franchise at the given time, but nobody would give up that little for somebody like Mike Trout or Juan Soto in real life. On top of that, progression is very laughable. I've had a franchise going for the last 10 years, and I have players that are 28 or 29 years old that have been in the league since they were 18. And they're already starting to degrade. I realize that playing 10 years in the MLB puts a lot on the body, but you have a lot of players that retire that are only 32, 33 years old. You don't see a lot of players over the age of like 36 playing in the MLB, but the fact that they drop off a cliff over the span of a couple years is just ridiculous. On top of that, in my franchise, I have a player like Taijuan Walker who's an A overall potential, 99 overall, and he sucks like every year. His ERA is like a 4 or 5. And I'm like, in real life, if you consistently had a pitcher that was 4 or 5 ERA, they wouldn't be very good. They wouldn't be the best in the league either. So I know there's a little bit with like hot and cold streaks, and if you play well for like a month or over the course of like 10 games, it does like a little update at the end of the month, and some players gain some potential in that regard, but I think the whole progression thing needs to change. There are a lot of players that play very well, and their ceiling is just not high, even if they play consistently well for years, and that wouldn't be what's in the real MLB. I mentioned trades a little bit ago. I think one thing that would really help out the game is 3-team trades, players to be named later, cash, like trades that actually happen in real life. I know the whole player to be named later thing might be kind of hard to do in a video game because you have to like check back in by a certain date or something like that, but just like a 2-team trade with only 3 players just doesn't seem very realistic. There's a lot of players that get traded and they send like 4 or 5 in return. Even just like tweaking it so like the number of players in the maximum trade is different would be nice. Budget's also kind of insane. I've done a few franchises where I like clear out the rosters, there's no stars or anything, and like the budget comes with it. And sometimes I've had salary caps that are only like $20 million because all of the players on my team are like AAA, making $600,000-$700,000, and they just made it to the MLB. There needs to be a little bit more with budget. I mean, In the old games, you used to be able to sell tickets, do promotions, add seats, and that would add budget to your franchise. Nowadays, the only thing you can really do is have sponsorships, which everybody just buys the diamond sponsorships and attaches 3 right from the get-go. Other than that, you buy more budget, which resets at the end of the season anyway. Buying budget doesn't really help you out. The budget system itself kind of needs to change. I mean, no team would just go right back to having $5 million in the bank after every season. The morale system's also kind of annoying. I've had a lot of players that immediately get called up to the MLB and they want to be a star. Like, they want to be number 3 or 4 in the lineup. The league doesn't work like that. You don't just expect to be called up from AAA and be the star all of a sudden. And there's no way to change that. There's no way to make the player happy. Even if sometimes you put them in the 3 or 4 hole and they're, not the greatest overall. Like, there's just so many things that make the players unhappy that you're not able to change. And that's really it. Like, there's just a lot of customization features that I think would really improve the quality of life of franchise. You could also add international players. You could integrate more sponsorships into the game. A lot of the creative players that get drafted don't actually have sponsored like bats or gloves or anything. It's just all generic, so you have to like go in and edit it yourself. And I don't really like scout too many players or anything like that, but the one thing I've noticed in many draft classes across the years is there's no generational talent. You could play NHL and have a superstar that pops up like once every 10 years. In MLB, you don't really have that. You don't have a Juan Soto or a Ken Griffey Jr. that's like immediately good at an 18, it was a steal, and they perform right away. A lot of the players you get have like a potential, but they're in the 30s, and by the time they're like 30 years old, they're about like a 60 overall. Like, they're never going to make the MLB. There's a lot of players that just aren't very good. I've also done some sims, and the players that seem to be treated the best out of anybody is starting pitchers. Relief pitchers don't really get rated high overall. I know we have closers in the game, maybe like sandwiching those two together, because really like the closing pitchers are the only ones that have potential that actually grow past like an 80. But there's a lot of starting pitchers. I'm in year 11 of this franchise, and like literally everybody's bullpen is 81, 82 overall starting pitchers. Their entire rotation is anywhere from like 82 to 95. Realistically, you're not going to have all sorts of starting pitchers in the bullpen. Most people are going to be using relief pitchers who are better than average. I'm sure there's a whole lot more that could be discussed with franchise, but I'm going to move on to the next topic, and that is Create a Stadium. Now, I know Create a Stadium's been in the works for like 4 or 5 years. It was like single-handedly developed by a couple of people. There's like an animator and then the other person who made like the Create a Stadium itself. But the one thing I don't want to see happen is Create a Stadium be made and then just kind of left in the dust. I'm unsure if the vaults are going to carry over from year to year, but I just don't want them to say like, here it is, and then just kind of leave it untouched like a lot of other features. We've had discussion about night games, bullpen placements. I mean, one of the things they added after the fact was a way to search stadiums. I mean, that seemed like it was something that was a no-brainer, but they added it like mid-season. They added a few props mid-season. There's so much more you could add to Create a Stadium too. Like, I don't know about the logo editor. Like, you can edit whatever you want. I know I'm a logo creator, but there's like some ways that people would go nuts with the stadiums, putting a lot of inappropriate content into the Create a Stadiums. But one thing I think that would make a ton of sense is to maybe purchase some sponsorships or just even have billboards or signage that you could put with some of the sponsors in the game. I mean, who wouldn't want a billboard that just has the Nike swoosh on it in different colors? Even putting stuff on the walls. Like, a lot of MLB teams have custom signage on their walls. In the game, though, a lot of it gets replaced with generic stuff, but in Create a Stadium, you don't have anything. You don't even have like the foul line markers. You don't even have the distance markers. Like, a lot of that would be cool to add. The stadiums could also use a little bit more life. There's not very many fans outside of their seats. There's a lot of opportunity where you could have fans walking on the pavilion. Might be kind of hard to do, but you could like generate people walking by as you place like floor tiles. There's a lot of improvement for like terraining and landscaping. I know you can put in like some grass and some dirt, but maybe adding some water or going lower into the ground would be helpful. You could also put the logos on the grass. Like, I know some teams have their logo behind home plates. I think it would be great to have like a color wheel for props. I know a lot of them are just like physical things that are in the system as an object and you can only place those objects, but like, what if you could do a color wheel for seats or like the walls or anything like that instead of just some pre-selected props? And lastly, it would be really cool to play a stadium against some friends. I know you can play ranked games and pick a stadium as your stadium for your home field, but there's no opportunity to like try out stadiums with friends. That's a lot of the cool thing is like you can share stadiums and other experiences with other players. You don't necessarily know the players that you're playing in Diamond Dynasty, but if you want to play a friend, do a little practice, playing in a created stadium would be pretty cool. On top of customization, I've been harping on this for a while, but it'd be cool to have a little bit more customization for jerseys and logos. They've added jerseys for like the MLB and like minor league teams and like some throwbacks, which is really cool. Some added authenticity would be selecting your jerseys before the game, like a road alternate or a home alternate, adding some more shoulder patches and like things on the sleeve. One thing that's got to be added is a team vault. One of the things that would save me a ton of time with making logos is just being able to create the logos, the jerseys, anything about the team like you would in franchise, and just being able to like export it for somebody else to use, either in franchise or Diamond Dynasty. A lot of people ask me like, hey, can you make my uniform once you make the logos? Can you like recommend a look that I could do for my team? And I can't help them. For the sake of sharing, it would be so cool to just be able to create a team, upload it to the vault, and have somebody else download it for later. You could share so many fictional teams or Diamond Dynasty team ideas that somebody could just download with the push of a button and not have to do as much legwork. I also think like exporting players and rosters would be pretty cool from franchise. I know a lot of like older games used to do that, so we have a roster vault. Why not save a team that you have in franchise and save them for later, so you could like match up a team from one franchise against another team from a different franchise. I mentioned this last year, it's not the biggest thing, but just one thing I think would be really cool is when you have like the tops player of the game, just being able to take a screenshot and like use that picture as the created player's picture once you go to like look at their stats or something like that. There's like a variety of poses you could do, and like you could pick your favorite pose from like a album of the player screenshots that you took. Regarding broadcast changes, there's been a lot of strides made over the years. I know a lot of Diamond Dynasty players prefer to turn Matt Vasgersian off because he's been the face of the game for like 15 years. But I like the step they took with Road to the Show this year. Having those real videos like before something important's about to happen, adding that to franchise will be great. And another thing I kind of touched on last year is just more immersion with like what a local broadcast might be. I know you have like MLB Network and you have like the stats and graphics packages and stuff like that. But with a lot of the local channels, you have a little bit more of a small town feel. You have some like trivia between innings. You have some like advertised sponsorships that they announce between like batters. There could be more variety for like certain events. Like if you hit the record-breaking home run for a career, like not just having one voice line, but maybe a couple to pick from. And quite honestly, I would love to see a lot more announcer banter. 2K does this really well. They'll be talking for multiple possessions in a basketball game, and then if something were to happen, like a home run is hit, or in 2K's case, like a dunk, they actually like break from the conversation, get all excited, and then they go back to it. Baseball and broadcasting has a lot more opportunity for banter than other sports, just because there's so much dead time. A lot of the announcers talk to each other and have stories and share things between at-bats. Some other general gameplay changes I would like seeing is maybe adjusting perfects. Again, I don't really play competitively, so like hitting a perfect line out's not going to affect me as much as somebody playing for maybe $50,000. There's a lot of uncertainty. Like I know they shared like the statistics for like every so often you get a perfect, like here's how much you should have a hit as the end result. I'm not really sure how accurate that is, and I know like not every perfect should result in a base hit or like a home run or anything like that, but maybe just a little bit more transparency with how accurate the whole thing is. One thing I think would need to change is stamina and like pitcher speed. So stamina, like you have pitchers that can throw 102 the whole game. That's not very accurate unless you're like Justin Verlander that one time. Realistically, you're not going to have players throw their full velocity for the entire game, a full like 9 innings, or maybe even sometimes I've seen pitchers with 10 innings where they're still throwing hard. As I mentioned earlier, I'm not a huge Diamond Dynasty player, but the couple things that I think that the community might agree upon adding is a little bit more credit for the parallel system. I know it's new this year. I know it says in the corner like what person you were to achieve, like a parallel 5 before everybody else, but maybe having like a separate page where it's like a card catalog or even like the collections menu. In the past, if you were the first to discover a card, you would have your gamer tag next to it. Having your name like emblazoned somewhere for the entire world to see rather than just sharing a screenshot of the 1 in the corner would be a really receptive feedback change. Also, I don't play events. If I were to play Diamond Dynasty, events are probably the last thing on my mind, but we have multiple lineups for Diamond Dynasty, and I've seen a lot of people that aren't able to save their event lineups. They have to like make it from scratch every time they re-enter the event. That's kind of annoying. That's a good quality of life change. The last few things I want to touch on are really near and dear to me, might not be to you. The first of which is I really want MLB The Show merchandise. I know you have the streamers that get like the emblazoned like sweatshirts with their names on it, and that's fine. Like, I respect the community and like the hustle and the grind that some of them have. Well, like, there's no store to buy something MLB The Show related if you're not a streamer that's really high up here. In fact, I've had to buy a couple knockoff shirts from Redbubble from some random user because I want MLB The Show merch so bad. I want a Coach doll. I want more hats like the deluxe edition. I want like a t-shirt, some sweatpants. Like, there's so many routes you could go with MLB The Show merch. I know that doesn't directly relate to MLB 22, but like, it would be nice if they did it coinciding with the launch or something like that. I just really want to get my hands on some official MLB The Show merch. I know it's weird to save this until the end, but there's one thing I want you to take from this video that is like the biggest change I want in MLB 22. I want more transparency on year-to-year saves. I know I've shared this story on Twitter quite a bit, and maybe you've heard it before, but year-to-year saves were awesome. Like, the baseball seasons are very long. Being able to play a franchise that you started in MLB The Show 14 and bringing it all the way to 2020 is something that is just really unique and fortunate to have because, like, the seasons are so long. It literally destroyed me that in MLB 21, I couldn't continue my franchise's progress. And you know what I did because of that? I did not start a franchise on MLB 21. I kept playing 2020 because the mode I respected was still on the older game. It just seems so strange to have a feature like that. And I know there might be some things that they aren't able to share behind closed doors because they, you know, maybe Xbox or Microsoft had some change that necessitated the year-to-year saves to be removed because it was unfair to PlayStation players. But you have things like the logo vault that carried over. And I know a lot of people that put a lot of tireless work into the roster vault. Like I said, I'm not sure about the created stadium vault or anything like that. But just the amount of work that people put into franchise and, you know, don't just sim every single game in franchise. Like, they actually play the games instead of just running a simulation as a GM. There's a lot of hardcore players out there who want to live out every game. They want to develop some players and make some memories and like talk to friends about like some of the things they did on franchise mode. And I've been doing that with my friends for the last 5 or 6 years. It just stinks, you know, like to have something that you were able to cherish for multiple years like taken away. And I know like a lot of Road to the Show players were unhappy for the same reason once Diamond Dynasty was integrated into Road to the Show. I think the whole creative player thing's kind of tired in that regard. So if you're a Road to the Show player and you kind of feel the same way I did for a completely different reason, I empathize with you. But just the fact that there are people who play offline, and it would be nice to have not every mode just restart at the start of the year. With like the buying of the cards and everything, I understand because like you can't consistently have people with 99 overall cards for years. But the work that some people put into developing rosters, making old throwback teams, and making like player faces and stadiums and stuff, that's a lot of work that should be saved, should be carried over from year to year. If you want to grow the game, that's the best way to do it. If you want repeat customers to buy the new edition of the game, make sure that they can carry over the memories they've made from the old one to some extent into the new one. So yeah, that's my wish list. I'm off my soapbox. Like, obviously I'd really like to see if the game comes out on Switch and you can do cloud saves and things like that, but ultimately none of that's really going to matter if you can't do year-to-year saves. Like, what's the point of transferring a cloud file from PlayStation to Switch and playing it on the go if it's not going to do anything the next year? Regardless, I don't want this to seem like a negative video and say like the game's terrible. I still very much enjoy MLB The Show. Just this year especially really took a hit with me in terms of the amount of time that I played. I'm a franchise lifer and I know people want completely different features than me in franchise mode. You can't please everyone. You can't add a ton of things into 1 year. Like, you have to have time to develop, but the year-to-year saves thing was like the biggest one for me. I'm looking forward to the news that we're going to get about MLB 22. Might take a while with the lockout, but you know, with all the stuff that they did this last year, like the amount of content they made in terms of like going to a new console and during the pandemic and everything proves to me that like there is a big development that could take place. I know you might be prepping for more next gen as more people get their hands on like PS5s and stuff like that, but I don't want this to be an off year where it's just like, you know, we improve the graphics a little bit and that's it. This was a long wish list video and I thank you for taking the time to watch it all the way through. I'll be trying to have more MLB The Show content every Thursday. I'm sticking to a schedule. I have a new schedule with The Show Thursdays where I will be talking about new release news. I will be doing more of my History of the Show series. And hopefully with some changes to MLB 22, I'll be more invested into franchise this time around. But that's the video. I mean, there's just so much that could take place over the next few months that I'm excited for. These were the things that were a little bit more near and dear to me. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, drop it a like. I'll be having more MLB The Show content like I mentioned going forward. MLB The Show 22 just has a ton of potential to really knock our socks off, and I'm excited to see what they do. I know wishlist videos like this just a few months before launch is kind of lost to some degree, but it's cool to speculate. Again, thanks so much for watching. My name is Kasabe, and I will see you guys on the next The Show Thursday.